I'm Dylan Radigan. I've interviewed nearly every CEO and most world leaders during the past 25 years. And now I'm bootstrapping. I'm turning my attention to the new CEOs and the irrepressible entrepreneurs leading the next generation of innovation in the world. Welcome back to Tasty Live. I am Dylan Radigan, and it's time for another episode of Bootstrapping. Our guest today, Lisa Guerrero. Her book, soon to release, Warrior, My Path to Being Brave. Lisa, we have somewhat of a shared professional history broadly with journalism and broadcast journalism, although from different pieces of it. But what led you to write a book about bravery?
Hi, Dylan. Thank you for having me. First of all, I chase bad guys for a living. I like to say I'm now an investigative correspondent for Inside Edition. So our viewers see me on camera physically running after scam artists or criminals or, crooked politicians or crazy televangelists, what have you. They see me running after them and demanding answers and demanding accountability from them. So I started to read the comments once these stories were posted on Inside Edition's YouTube channel, where we get a lot of younger, very diverse audience members. And I started to read these comments saying, wow, she reminds me of Wonder Woman. She's so brave. And then I started really digging into these comments. And Dylan, some of them were from kids saying, I wish I were more brave. How can I be brave? I'm getting bullied at school. Or my mother gets bullied by my father and I want to protect her. How can I be brave like that? Lisa, are you reading these comments? How can I be brave like you? And one night I was going through, I probably had a glass of Chardonnay, and I was going through all these comments and I started crying, thinking, people really think of me as this brave woman. First of all, am I brave? What does that mean? And if I am brave, how can I encourage other people to tap into their inner courage that I believe we all have? So I started writing about it, and I had kept a journal for years as a former sportscaster, as an actor. I had always kept a journal, but I went back and I said, is there a path here to bravery? Are there lessons through the obstacles that I faced as being the only woman in a locker room, for example, or going through a public divorce, or dealing with misogyny in broadcasting? Are there lessons I can take that can help everybody be more brave? And I discovered that, I think that I had a pathway to being brave. I wasn't born brave, but bravery is like a muscle. And the more that you use it, and the more that you do small acts of bravery every day, the more courageous you become.
So obviously, from our perspective, our primary audience revolves around finance and startups.
Yeah.
But the character insight, I think, probably has a universal application. And so I'd be interested to hear you talk a little bit more about how you define, how you define the training for that bravery muscle, as it were.
So this is a great question, Dylan, because I do a lot of keynote speeches. I talk a lot to businesses, to sales people, to CEOs. And what I tell them is that courage doesn't come from audacity. Courage comes from empathy. So once you connect with your buyer, once you connect with your audience, once you connect with your viewer, once you connect, in my case, with victims or survivors of abuse, once I connect with them and I have empathy for them, then I become somebody that can lead the way into a place of courage, because I wasn't born courageous, but I learned to be courageous through overcoming obstacles. So I put myself in the position of my viewer or a listener. And through that empathy, through that connection of sympathy, I start to realize, hey, this is what they're thinking. I think a lot of times on television, you see people, either political pundits or broadcasters, speak to an audience, almost pontificating to an audience, rather than thinking about it as a conversation with somebody at home that's listening to you and communicating back in their way to you. And bravery is something that is a real connection between two people to me. the victims that come to me and the bad guys who I chase down. I'm the conduit between those two things. So I'm the vessel for courage. And if you think about that in terms of business, it becomes a lot easier because you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with a client base, you're dealing with CEOs, executives, board members. You're a conduit for this product or for this idea.
Yeah, I just, my experience is that it's very easy to be brave 95% of the time, and that it's very difficult to be brave 5% of the time. And the only time that it actually matters that you are brave is during the 5% of the time that you don't want to be. And so, but I suspect that being brave during the 95% of the time when it's relatively easy or even it's socially rewarded, there's times when being brave is socially punished. Yeah. Where it's antithetical. So I'm kind of, in other words, do you think it's necessary to be brave in the easier environments in order to build up the strength to be brave in the more challenging moments?
Yes. In my book, Warrior, I write about, lessons to being brave. And I talk about exercises you can do. And one of the exercises, and you've heard before, I think Oprah, has talked about, commit a random act of kindness every day. I take that concept and I change it a little bit. Commit a random act of bravery every day. And these could be small things. This could be, if you're a broadcaster, be the first person to raise your hand in the press conference. Sounds small. It takes a lot of guts to be the first person to pitch an idea, to ask a question. If you're a kid, to sit next to the kid at lunch that nobody else wants to sit next to. These small acts of courage, these small acts of pushing the bubble, pushing the boundaries, getting outside that comfort zone, make you over time more willing to lean into courage during that 5% of the time that you mentioned, Dylan, when you really need it. In Warrior, I write about, for example, being the only woman in the locker room when I first started my sportscasting career in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was, I realized that the bravest thing I could do while I was kicking and clawing and scratching and literally physically trying to get into the front of an athlete's locker to try to ask a couple of questions of Shaquille O'Neal after a game. I had to physically elbow my way up there to ask that question. I realized that small act of being the first person to get that first question in made me more brave. And it also, and this is really important, this is key, it made my audience respect me. And by audience, I don't just mean my viewers. It meant Shaquille O'Neal. And it meant my colleagues around me that saw, wow, Lisa Guerrero is like really scratching and pushing and shoving her way in to the front of that scrum to ask that first question. Nobody knew that. My audience didn't know that, but that took a lot of courage for me to do that. And it was painful and it was physically difficult. But those small acts of courage led me to be able to now, last week, somebody pulled a gun on me doing an investigation about police corruption. I stood up to that fearless. Nothing scares me anymore, Dylan. And I don't say that lightly. Nothing scares me and nobody scares me anymore. How do you make
the distinction? You said something interesting earlier in this conversation about the distinction between what you would define as bravery or courage and then what you would define as audacity. Yes. And I'm curious where and how you draw that distinction.
To me, the idea of being brave, a lot of people, think that it's a swagger that you have. Like you come out of the womb ready to fight, ready to go to war. That is a different type of bravery or courage than what I'm talking about. To me, that's putting on a show. That's an exterior. That's the image of bravery. That's trying to put on, a suit of armor and saying, look, I'm brave, I'm going to go to war. Real courage, real bravery is not just about, how do I appear to other people? Real bravery is how do you appear to yourself? How do you view yourself? Do you wake up every morning saying, today's going to be difficult. I know I have this set of challenges in front of me, whether it's personal or professional. And how I face those challenges is what is my legacy? My legacy isn't about the challenges I face. It's how I face those challenges, how I overcome those challenges. And I really think it's such a personal thing. And my book Warrior is about my really personal stories, intimate, honest, embarrassing, sometimes humiliating stories of what I did wrong and right and how I learned from that. And all of those lessons at 58 have forged in me a real true courage. And it's not an audacious courage. It is an inner deep feeling that I can face anything.
I mean, the thing that I've noticed in my own life and even in people around me is that so much of existence is in the micro decisions. So people have these huge strategies or whatever, but when it comes to the decision for the next 30 seconds, where do I point my thinking? Where do I point my attention? Where do I just call them micro decisions or micro thoughts, which seems to actually be the place where I have, I both observe in myself the biggest lack of discipline sometimes is in the micro decisions, despite whatever larger spectrum strategy I may be employing. And I see it in others. And I'm curious, if you have any particular techniques or self-awareness that you've developed to help improve the micro decision making, which is the foundation ultimately of everything else.
Thank you for asking that. I write about it seems like it's a small thing. It is an enormous thing. I write about research and preparation. As a journalist, I need it. In business, you've got to do it. Before I ever pick up a microphone, I pick up my reading glasses. I pick up my reading glasses because I am going to do days, weeks, even months of research. I'm going to read court documents. I'm going to read witness statements. I'm going to read local, regional, and national news links about whatever the issue is that I'm doing an investigation on at the time. It's not glamorous and it's not on camera. My investigations on Inside Edition may be 4 minutes long, but in those 4 minutes, I'm trying to convey several different concepts at once. And I'm talking to a victim, I'm talking to an expert, I'm setting the table for what the problem is, and then I'm confronting the bad guy, right? So all of those steps require an enormous amount of research before I ever get on camera. And in every aspect of my life, I write about, when I was a professional cheerleader at one point. I was a Rams cheerleader. I wanted to become a director. I wanted to be a choreographer. And I eventually was the first entertainment director for the Atlanta Falcons. That was a woman. I was 26. I was the youngest entertainment director in the league. How did I do that from being a cheerleader? Well, I researched. I realized that, the entertainment unit is part of the marketing unit of an NFL team. You need sponsors. You need to be an ambassador in the community. How are you going to hire cheerleaders or marching band members? How are you going to book halftime shows, pregame singers, postgame concerts? What is my market here? How much of a budget do I have? What's the interest level from management on doing these entertainment unit events? I did a lot of research before I walked into the Atlanta Falcons executive offices with a binder full of ideas and sponsorship concepts before I got that job. And I got that job in the room. At the time, I was 24 and I had just been a professional cheerleader, but I knew the value of marketing. I knew the value of what that cheerleading experience was. As a cheerleader myself, we would go into the community. And for many people that are NFL fans, the only people they will ever meet face to face from that team is not the players, because they don't even live there. It's the cheerleaders who come from that community, live there, are from there, and after they're done cheering, they have raised families there. So I understood the value of that entertainment unit, and I created a process to hire other cheerleaders and to have a marketing team around just that entertainment unit. So again, that took research. That wasn't me being the prettiest or the best dancer or the most charming in the interview process. That was a product of me doing months of research to put this concept together. So after being a cheerleader, I became a cheerleading director. I became the entertainment director for both the Atlanta Falcons and the New England Patriots, and spent 10 years in the NFL developing these concepts.
And what do you hope people get out of this book?
I hope that people understand the value of having bad things happen to you. Your trauma, your challenges, your obstacles are a gift. because that's an opportunity for you to learn from those things and to forge a stronger spirit. I like to say I used to be a size 4, now I'm a size 8 because I had to develop a thick skin. And that has helped me in every aspect of my life. So I hope that when people read Warrior, they'll go, wow, she's had a crazy career, cheerleader, actress, sportscaster, now investigative reporter. But the reason that I was able to do those things is because I was able to tap into my inner courage, and we all have it. And we can all achieve our dreams and our goals, not by just throwing it out there in some new agey way. Oh, visualize it, it'll happen. Can't just visualize it. You have to work for it. You have to research. You have to prepare. You have to steel yourself for bad things. They're going to happen. It's not the bad things. It's how you overcome the bad things.
Lisa Guerrero, the name, Warriors, the book. You can catch her on Inside Edition, but today she's teaching lessons of her own experience developing bravery in forms large and small. I am Dylan Radigan. This is Bootstrapping, and you are watching Tasty Live.